And we are back. Oh boy, back for another day, another Hawks talk. Man, we had a lot of fun on last episode, but today I am bringing in the man that needs no introduction. Another great guy to follow online. KL Chenard. We had him on earlier. KL, was it only like a couple months ago you came on and talked with me?
Yeah, it was at some point during this past season, probably in the new year after in 2016.
2016, man. It feels like forever, but NBA years seem to extend in life. Oh man, how are you doing this morning?
Good, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come and talk some Hawks basketball with me. I always look forward to this. Always. Oh, well, guys, last episode we talked about Al Horford, and we kind of did a deep dive into his possibility of what will happen with him in the future. Now, for today's episode, I kind of want to go over a deep dive of the other big thing, in my opinion, which would be possibly the point guard situation for the next couple years. But before we get into that, KL, I asked our last guest, what is your opinion on, your thoughts on the All-NBA team? We didn't really talk about that, but the thing that really we got into and talked about was the all defensive team. First of all, how good is Paul Millsap? I just like to hear how good he is.
He's really good, and he's one of those people that is intense 82 games a year. It's remarkable. You don't really see too many people play the way he does over the incredible slog that is the marathon of an NBA season. But he's pretty intense on the defensive end. No matter how many games there are, he's just always physical, always doing what he needs to do. And the incredible part is his hands. I mean, he's only 6 foot, 6 really. Okay, I know the official guide says 6'8", but I think if you go back and look at the draft measurements, he's probably more like 6'6". He's like the same size as Korver when they stand next to each other in the in the locker room. And he does it all with his strength and his conditioning and his incredible hands. I've just never seen anybody that if you show them the ball at all. And the one thing that both he and Horford did this year, I think that maybe they hadn't done as much in prior years. And I don't know if it was an emphasis with coaching or if it was just a matter of being the third year in the system, but they really both embraced the verticality thing.
Yeah. I kind of noticed that this year, but that's why you're here, so you can tell me, so I can make sure. Oh, I was actually right about something.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, it's a rule that seems like it would be advantageous for somebody like Roy Hibbert, who's 7'3", but it works for somebody that's Millsap size too. I mean, if you're big and strong and you go straight up and you can get above the rim, you can be in somebody's way. And I just thought that his rim protection this year was absolutely remarkable. The nice thing for Millsap is that even though he isn't the tallest person, he has this incredible burst. I remember watching the first game of the season against Drummond and the Pistons and thinking, oh my goodness, I was worried that he was going to get hurt because he was just high, and every time he would jump, somebody would be underneath him when he landed, and it just seemed like the scariest thing. If I was 4 steps up on a ladder and had to come down 40 inches, I'd take it one step down at a time, very, very carefully, instead of just jumping off the ladder. But that's essentially what he was doing on every play, multiple times a play, and there were people underneath him, and it was just, I don't know, it was almost scary to see somebody coming down from that height as often as he did with people underneath him. But he just had a really incredible burst on those defensive plays this year.
Oh, yeah. Loved it. Now, How is it Paul Millsap was kept off the All NBA team? I thought he was easily the second best power. You know, maybe the best power forward in the East this year. I was surprised that he was kept off. Um, do I have a right to complain about this? He
I,
was a top 15 player this year to me.
he
With
was
how
a
good
top
he
15
was.
player. The problem is that the way the all NBA teams are done is that they include centers. And so
Hmm.
if you look at the way the voting shook out, I mean, there were three really good centers, uh, DeAndre Jordan and Marcus Cousins and Andre Drummond. But, you look at those three players and two of them, can't find their way out of a hack-a-shack.
Hmm.
Third, DeMarcus Cousins is,
DeMarcus Cousins.
a great player that hasn't helped his team win more than, 35 games in forever?
It also helps, like, doesn't help when he gets, I guess you would say, benched due to attitude.
Right.
Yeah, attitude reasons at times. Yeah.
So if you look at the voting, Paul Millsap was the top vote getter among forwards and centers that didn't actually make one of the three teams. And so it's interesting if you look at those three players that are at center, and I really think they got the right one with DeAndre Jordan. I thought he had a really remarkable year. I mean, if you set aside the hack-a-shack stuff, he was great on offense, great on defense, had a nice year. But at the same time of, looking at those three players, I really think that Draymond Green was better than all three. And that's where it gets tricky is because Draymond ended up on the second team. And the voting was kind of crazy. If you look at the points, DeAndre Jordan made the first team at center, and he had like 317 points. And he had 39 first-place votes. Draymond Green had over 400 points. So he had about 100 points more than DeAndre Jordan. He had 40 first-place votes. So he had one more first-place vote than DeAndre Jordan had. But he was on the second team because somehow he was listed at forward. Now, if you look at those first-place votes, 37 of his first-place votes were at center. People that said, okay, Draymond is my first-team center. And 3 of them said Draymond was a first-team forward. So really, Draymond Green should have been the All-NBA first-team center. He had more points. He had more overall first-team votes. And if you look at his collection of first-team votes, they were almost, 90% of them had him at center. And yet they put him at forward, they put him on the second team, and they made DeAndre Jordan the first-team center. Now, had they put Draymond Green at center as the first-team center, DeAndre Jordan would have been the second-team center, DeMarcus Cousins would have been the third-team center, and Millsap would have slotted in at forward behind those guys, and he would have been a third-team forward on the All-NBA team. But because they made Draymond Green a forward, that bumped Millsap out.
Man, I wonder how that happens. So, okay, so.
Yeah, I don't know if the rules for that are codified. I don't know how exactly that all shakes out. Do you have to go by the position that they originally slot you in? Do they have some formula by which they look at where the voters put people and say, okay, that's your position because that's what the voters said? I don't know how it works. And so many things in the NBA are codified, the CBA and, all the media rules. I haven't seen one that exactly spells out how the All-NBA voting works. So I'm going to say that I'm in the dark on that one.
Yeah, well, if you're in the dark, then whew, I am light years behind them. But so this is interesting. You're talking about DeAndre Jordan. I think I was under the thought that when I had my initial kind of just guesses and reviews as a fan sitting back here, I was under the thought of putting Draymond Green as the first team center just because he plays center half the time on that team because, they go small more often than not. And he really defends like every position. We saw it, kind of in the playoffs with him, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm just a straight homer and I wanted Millsap on the team. That's probably what it was.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, if you look at what Draymond Green did, if you actually quantify it, maybe he played 30% of his minutes at center or something like that. But if you actually think about it, I mean, what were the Warriors? The best thing about the Warriors was that lineup with Draymond at center. And what did the Warriors do? They won 73 games. So if you talk about the best thing about the best team that had the best regular season ever, then even if that only happened 25% of the time, if it was that big of a factor in them getting to 73 wins, it seemed worthy of a first team All NBA position.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. So
I don't mean this as a slight to DeAndre Jordan. Like I said, if you just set the hack stuff aside, he had an incredible year. I mean, I think if you had your pick and you were running the Clippers, would you rather have Blake Griffin or DeAndre Jordan?
So earlier in the year, I was pro Blake Griffin for a trade, but DeAndre Jordan's more durable.
Right.
He's incredibly athletic, incredibly big, rebound, everything. He's a great defensive centerpiece. I will say that.
Yeah.
Well, part of me kind of wondered with DeAndre Jordan is, you know what, and he is incredibly gifted, but I'll just play devil's advocate here. Part of me wonders with DeAndre Jordan is if Chris Paul were not on the team, would we be getting the kind of, I guess, production from him? Because at least in the couple games, few games I watch, I don't watch every Clippers game. I'll admit that.
Sure.
A lot of his points come from putbacks or lobs, dunks. I rarely see him actually setting up to get his own offense in that case. Defensively and rebounding, he is amazing, and I think that would kind of stay the same.
No, I agree. I think that's fair. I mean, if you look at, who could create their own offense, I think that Blake Griffin would definitely have an advantage, and that DeAndre Jordan is, is reliant on his point guard. But at the same time, he's good enough on the pick and roll that Chris Paul is the kind of point guard that could get anybody a lob pass on the pick and roll. But I actually think that DeAndre Jordan is so good and such a good leaper and so good on those dives to the rim that he doesn't really need a point guard as good as Chris Paul. I think there are a lot of point guards who could find DeAndre Jordan for lobs at the rim. I mean, I'm sure there's some that couldn't. Brandon Knight, I've seen him throw some absolutely horrific lob passes. And I guess that's a bet. You don't want to put Brandon Knight and DeAndre Jordan in the same sentence because that brings up memories of the time that Jordan dunked on him.
Oh, right. Hey, man, I thought Brandon Knight did the right thing.
Most point guards could get DeAndre a lob pass.
I thought Brandon Knight did the right thing. He tried to defend it. He tried to take one for the team.
I agree. I think
that's full support of that. I was in full support of that. And I was like, wait a second. Why are we hating on Brandon Knight for this?
No, I am 100% behind Brandon Knight's effort. I'm not sure he's a point guard, and I'm not sure he's a starter, but I love the way he competes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about the All NBA team. We're talking about how awesome Paul Millsap is.
Reel this in. We're getting way too far from here.
Yeah, too far from the subject. We didn't cover this in our last pod, so I'm kind of glad we're going over this right now. But real quick, I just want to know your thought on the other great defensive player on the team, not named Al Horford or Cephalosha, defensive stopper Mike Scott. Clearly, Mike Scott getting a vote for I know Mike Scott improved his defense this year compared to how he looked in the past, which isn't really saying much, but enough to get a all defensive player vote.
You got to wonder a little bit. I mean, if you look at the numbers, like his defensive rating was absolutely phenomenal. So, if somebody was looking at that, maybe they could have gone by that and said, hey, he had a really good season, and he did. If you look at the pairing of Mike Scott with Al Horford, that was a really good defensive combination for the Hawks this year. I mean, I know Mike Scott hasn't been the greatest defensive player in the past, but I really do think he had a great year. Like, if you break it down, I think one of the things he did really well was he would initiate the blows. He was really physical with players off the ball.
He was, yeah.
If the ball was on the other side of the court and he was guarding somebody, he made sure he had contact, and he was really, really physical, which is probably, that's tough for somebody his size. He's not the world's biggest power forward.
No. That's a good point that you brought up.
But, the other thing is the voter that voted for Mike Scott is from he's one of the TV or radio people for Oklahoma City. And, I wonder a little bit, and I know the vote is done with a drop-down menu too. So, alphabetically, Mike Scott, Thabo Sefolosha, former Oklahoma City Thunder, maybe it was one of those scroll-down things. I don't
know. I had Bo Cherney with us on my last on the last episode, and he said the exact same thing. He says, "Yeah, my thought is, what if it was just a scroll down and he meant to pick Sefolosha and it went to Scott?" that was
that whole unit. I mean, that unit of Schroeder, Hardaway, Sefolosha, Scott, Horford, that unit had a lot of cohesiveness. Even when it was splitter at the beginning of the season instead of Horford, as those four bench players and Horford, that was a really tight defensive unit that got them through some tough times up until February, March, April. Early in the season, it was their bench that was helping them stay in games when the starters were having their troubles.
Yeah. Boy. That seems like such a long time ago. Just thinking about
got to go in at the end of the year.
Yeah, just starting to think of a splitter in the lineup. That just seems like such a long time ago. Wow. NBA is like dog years, as I say. But
yeah, and I don't think we ever really got the full Tiago experience.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how he plays the season. If you compare how he was with the Hawks with, the kind of stuff he did with the Spurs a year earlier, maybe he wasn't quite healthy enough to perform at the level that he did in San Antonio. I don't know.
Well, I also wonder with the case of Mike Scott if the numbers and everything was helped by who was on the floor with him at the time.
Sure.
Just because, you have Sefolosha and or Millsap, Horford, or Splitter. He was rarely with Muscala, at least my memory. But it makes me wonder because I remember years ago there's an article out on ESPN back when I want to say the whole Big Three with the Heat started up. There was an article talking about how maybe Mike Bibby isn't as bad as a defender as we thought he was, and they went to his numbers, and the numbers that they used were the numbers when he was on the floor with Horford, Marvin, and Josh Smith. And they try to say, maybe he's not that bad of a defender, blah, blah, blah. And I immediately thought that for this. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as a one-on-one defender, maybe he wasn't, but I thought he did a good job with the team defense. I thought, that he was physical. One of the things I see in these playoffs, and this is going to sound bad, I guess, but it reminds me a little bit about like college football in the 90s when I'm watching these playoffs. And I mean it in this way. You watch these games and the players foul so much that there's just literally no way that the referees can call them all. Right?
Yeah.
Like that one play, that crazy inbounds play with Dion Waiters where he took the ball and he was inbounding it and he just shoved off before he did the inbounds play. I mean, if you watch that play, there were
9 fouls
in 5 seconds. And they actually listed them all in the 2-minute review. And it's sure, there were 6 fouls in a 6-second span, and you can't, the referees can't possibly call them all because, number one, they can't see them all. And number two, if you call literally every foul, it gets kind of boring. It's not a very good product. It kind of bogs down the way Hack-a-Shaq bogs down a game.
Yeah.
So, it's really a terrible thing, and I think it hurts players like Korver that operate away from the ball where they're more hesitant to call fouls. But, I think with somebody like Mike Scott, I think that he was, sort of engaging physical contact away from the ball, fouls be damned. If they're going to call a foul, let them call it. But if they don't, you're better off being physical than letting somebody, slip by you with no contact whatsoever. And so I just thought all season long, I thought Mike Scott took that aggressive attitude towards things.
I came around on Mike Scott this year. In the past, I just kind of, I don't know. I wasn't on the Mike Scott hype train in the past few years, but this year I actually kind of like admitted, okay, he's something. I acknowledge he was a better defender. I like how he runs the floor. I felt he took a step this year, and I was just kind of like, all right, I'm all about it. So you know what, Mike Scott, you're one. I'm always going to hold on to this one defensive player voting that you got. Just going to hold on to it.
As will I.
Yes. So, man, all right. So let's get into the main thing I wanted to talk about today. The Hawks have a point guard situation that's going to be coming up the next couple of years. And this might be the summer that, you may have to do something about it if you want to, I guess, cash back. So I was talking with Garrick. I was talking with Bo. I saw a rumor from Kurt Heelan of NBC Sports saying that the Utah Jazz were shopping their number 12th draft pick in the hopes of a point guard or wing player. Now, I said, if this is all a possibility, I would definitely look towards moving. I guess I would say Jeff, just because he's the veteran. Because reasonably, that's probably what the one in that situation they would take. I would actually look at that and be like, yes, you know what, I would do it. But I don't know. I don't know if you've seen that rumor, that random tweet, and just go crazy with your thoughts on this.
Okay. Which team was it again? Was it, you said Houston?
Utah.
Oh, Utah. Well, they already got a Hawks point guard.
Well, I said, hey guys, remember that time we did you a favor? But something that was pointed out from Garrick, he pointed out saying, well, maybe it's because they're desperate to make the playoffs because they want to, give Gordon Hayward a reason to stay there with his contract coming up soon.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it is a unique situation in that the Hawks, really through no fault of their own, they have 2 point guards who are going to be free agents in the same summer next summer, if it gets that far. And that's because, just based on the length of Dennis's rookie deal, you come in, those first round picks, their contracts are basically 4-year contracts. And so Dennis is going to be a free agent at the same time that Teague is. And so, that makes things interesting because it's hard to pay 2 guys the same position in the same summer. But at the same time, if you look at the way the Hawks roster is made up, if they trade one of them, the most immediate pressing need on the roster becomes get another point guard.
Yeah.
If you look at like Oklahoma City in the playoffs, and that's not quite the same situation as the Hawks because Westbrook is playing an incredible number of minutes. But when Westbrook goes off the floor, they're trying Dion Waiters running the show. They're trying, Randy Foye running the show. It's important to have that second guy to initiate the offense, especially in an offense like the Hawks or, the Thunder, where you don't have a second creator. Like the Cavaliers have the luxury of, Kyrie and LeBron. They've got, 2 guys on the floor that can run the offense at the same time. Hawks don't really have that. If they don't have Dennis or Jeff in the game, there's not somebody at another position that really can create offense for them. There's nobody that's going to be running pick and rolls. Nobody that's going to be running the show. I mean, you see like Bazemore and Millsap sort of as secondary creators. If, somebody closes out hard on them, they could put the ball on the floor and drive towards the rim. But they're not really the players that are going to run the pick and roll, penetrate the paint, and get the offense started, because you talk about pace and space for the Hawks. That all starts with having somebody that can get the defense off kilter. Somebody that can do something in a pick and roll or in an isolation situation where they've gotten past their defender enough that somebody needs to come over and help. And then once somebody helps, the ball starts moving to try to find that open guy. But none of that happens unless there's a point guard who's created some sort of mismatch, some sort of disadvantage. And if they trade one of the 2 point guards, you can play the other one 33, 35 minutes a game, but then you're still going to have those 13 minutes a game where you're going to say, well, who's going to break the defense down at this point?
Very true. Very true. And that is something that's been brought up before, and that is going to be something that's just going to have to be watched in the future. But, whew, boy, we go from something that we've had a huge advantage to, to something that's kind of like, I'm not that sure. I'm not that sure. Especially with Shelvin not being on the team anymore.
Yeah, that he really was the third creator. And without him on the roster, I don't know. They don't really have anybody in line. You look at, their draft and stash guys are, a power forward and a small forward. You look at the young guys like Lamar and Eddie, they're not point guards. So there really isn't anybody in the fold yet, unless it's somebody they draft this summer that's, sort of an heir to the throne.
Yeah. We're going to draft somebody this summer where we're going to have the same problem in years to come. But, well, I kind of wanted to talk about, I guess, I was talking with Jason, and he's mentioned to me saying, if Jeff is moved, let's just say Jeff for right now. We'll stick with moving Jeff before I talk about Dennis. If he is the one that is to be moved, do we look at a draft night trade, or will we look at something during free agency?
Oh, that's tricky. Let's see. Yeah, it's hard to say. The one thing about doing it, say, as a draft night trade is that, then depending on exactly how the trade works, you may have more cap space. That's one thing that could happen. So that kind of makes it interesting. It's tough to say. Yeah, I mean they're so close together there. They're only going to be a couple weeks apart. But it seems like more and more, not just with the Hawks, but across the NBA in general, that you see more things happening on draft night that you do at the trade deadline. Like the trade deadline seems like the last few seasons has been, not that big a deal. But, you look at the frequency of trades. I think you've seen the frequency of trades at the trade deadline go down over the last decade, and the frequency of trades on draft night go up over the last decade. So, just looking at the league as sort of a league-wide trend, I'd say you see more things on draft night than you used to.
Yeah. Man. And that's something to watch out for. If we use Utah, their 12th pick for this instance, I would say I'm wondering how much it would take to move up for that, because I'm imagining we'd have to throw in a couple draft picks along. Again, we'll just say Jeff in this instance, but that would be tough. So do you think it's worth holding on to both point guards for another year and just figuring it out next summer? Because if we get rid of one of them, I do not see an improvement in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I could see them holding on to both for another year. That's certainly one scenario that could play out. I mean, the thing about next summer is that if they did that, Teague would be an unrestricted free agent, and Schroeder would be a restricted free agent. So it's not like they'd both be unrestricted free agents in the same summer, which I think would be trickier. If you had sort of restricted free agency rights on one of them, you'd have a little bit of a more manageable situation next summer. So that might be one reason that you might see them keep both longer.
Yeah. Also, per se, let's just say the Hawks. Let's say they pick up a upgrade at the small forward position this summer. That that to me would mean, hey, they have a better shot to going deeper into playoffs. Have a better shot to have a better season if they pick up a upgraded small forward. Meaning, realistically, if you keep both Jeff and Dennis on the roster, you have a better chance. You have a better chance through the year than if you were to trade one of them. So, to me, especially with Mike Budenholzer being kind of the is he the president of the team? What is his exact role?
Yes, like team president and head coach.
Team president and head coach.
Wilcox is the general manager.
Okay. Wilcox is the general manager. To me, I've kind of pointed out to Garrick and a couple friends saying, coaches don't really. I'll just say coach for this instance, but don't really, I guess, strategize too much because like every season your win-loss record is kind of your resume. So if you willingly know that you're going to get worse for a year, who knows? I don't know. Who knows what may happen? And it's just hard to see, Budenholzer willingly wanting to take a step back, or just a coach in general take a step back. I don't know. Does that make sense, or am I going too crazy with this?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I wanted to backtrack to something you said a minute ago about upgrading at small forward.
If
I just think, but I just think that one of the things I'm interested to see this summer, just the way that the league has gone. It's been decade. It's pretty much been since the NBA was founded 70 years ago. That the big man was always at a premium, right? An average big man would command a bigger free agent salary than an average point guard or an average, wing. And it just seems like with more and more teams, playing switching defenses, emphasizing the three-pointer, it seems like there are, I don't know, it just seems like the market is going to swing towards these wing players at some point. And teams aren't going to be paying a premium for the big guys, and that the premium's really going to come for these 6'8", 6'9" wing guys that can do a little bit of everything because they're so useful. They're jack of all trades. They can run a pick and roll, they can rebound, they can play defense, they can switch and guard somebody smaller, they can switch and guard somebody bigger. And I don't know, it just seems like those guys are harder and harder to find. And I think that, when you say something like upgrade, I just think that, trying to find a free agent small forward is going to be, I think that's one of the things that's going to be harder and harder over the years as you go forward.
Yeah, you're right. I'm just saying this because of the free agent situation that the team has this year. And we don't know how much they're going to get offered. I'm assuming a team like the Lakers or New York or Orlando will offer, let's say, Al Horford. They'll offer him a good amount. And my thought is, if we want to retain him, how much we're going to have to pay. And then also regarding our starting small forward from this year, how much are we really willing to pay for him to return? And that's kind of, I don't know, just my thought. We'll say if they upgrade.
Usually when you bring up the topic of signing free agents to head coach Budenholzer, he's always careful to say, our priority is retaining our guys. So I really do think that they think of themselves as,
Yeah.
as a developmental system, and that they like the idea of continuity. Um, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm just really interested to see, over the next few years, how the market for free agents develops, because I think that teams are going to start to put a premium on on getting good perimeter players, and they're going to the really great ones are going to start commanding
A whole lot more. Well,
a lot more. Then the Hawks have done a good job in the past few years of they signed Damari Carroll in a reasonable contract. They signed Kent Bazemore on a reasonable contract, and they got guys at a reasonable rate, and worked them into their system and found good fits. And hopefully, Hardaway, makes a step in his second season the way that Bazemore and Carroll did. And you wonder, are they going to try to do the same thing? Is there somebody, a 23-year-old guy who's played a few years in the league that they can get on a cheap contract in the way that they did with Carroll and Bazemore? I'm interested to see that. I got the feeling that that's what they were hoping for out of Justin Holiday, and I guess maybe they thought that wasn't going to work.
yeah, that was my thought. When I saw him leave, I was kind of like, what? Yeah. That's a good point on Justin Holiday. But anyway, let me go back to our point guard talk for the day.
Okay.
Back to the point guard talk. So I talked about the possibility of keeping both. The possibility of keeping Jeff over Dennis. I don't know if a lot of, I will say, fans or whoever, if they are comfortable knowing that Dennis will be the one to have the starting job for 82 games next season. That will definitely be a mental hurdle. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to. If it comes out, KL, that Jeff is, let's just say if Jeff is traded during free agency or traded on draft night, it's going to take me the rest of that offseason to mentally prepare for watching Dennis for an entire season.
Yeah. I think he's going to have a unique opportunity this summer when he's working with the German national team.
Yeah.
The way that the Germans, it's not a great analogy necessarily, but the way the Germans run their offense, they really put the ball in their point guard's hands a lot. And so last summer, he was on a team with, Dirk Nowitzki. He was on a team with Tibor Pleiss. He was on a team with a guy that's probably going to get drafted this year named Paul Zipser. They're a pretty talented team. And they put the ball in his hands and said, Dennis, go get it for us. And not only that, but go get it for us against his own defense, where they're just waiting for you at the rim. Dennis's game is all about driving and getting to the rim, and they're just clogging the paint, waiting for him to get there. And he still did a pretty good job. That's a tough thing to do, is to be a driving point guard against his own defense, where they're just sitting there waiting for you. They're going to have probably almost the same German team this summer, minus Nowitzki. And so now he's on a team where he's the guy, right? So next, if they make Schroeder, if Schroeder is a starting point guard next year, he's going to have that preparation from this summer where he was in charge of a team. And he was the guy asked to do a lot. So he's going to get some experience this summer at being the point guard, and not even just the point guard, but the best player with some pretty talented guys. And it's fun to see his chemistry with Pleiss, because, we haven't seen it that much, except maybe in the preseason a little bit. But it's fun watching him play with somebody that's 7'3", and in the summer, watch him play with Pleiss and think, because last summer when he was playing with Pleiss, he got really good at throwing the lob passes to somebody that's 7'3" and could get over the top of the defense, and you wonder, hey, maybe he can do that with Eddie.
Yeah, That's a good point. I completely forgot that. First of all, that's how you say his name, which is surprising to me because I just been saying Tibor, please. Tibor,
I think it's Tibor Pleiss.
Tibor
I
Pleiss.
love watching the international games. The guy that does the color commentary just has the greatest accent in the world. And I'm trying to
Really?
remember what country he's from. But he says it as Tibor Pleiss, so I'm just ripping it off of what he says. I'm pretty sure that's how you.
Okay. Well, that's better than what I have. So that's what I'm going to roll with right there. Pleiss. All right. So, boy, is there a reason? Let me just ask you real quick before I move on and talk about Dennis a little bit more. What would be the logical reason to keep Jeff? If we were, it came down to you had to choose Jeff or Dennis. What would be the logical reason to keep Jeff over Dennis? Because he's a vet. Because he's more calm. What would it be?
I mean, I guess in the end, you just have to, if somebody theoretically feels like they've got to pick one player over the other, then you pick him because you think they're better. I see all these things about Horford when they talk about Horford's free agency, and they say, well, he'll be 34, he'll be 35 at the end of his deal. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that, but look at the analogy with Tim Duncan on the Spurs, right? It's like, oh my goodness, could you imagine having 34-year-old Tim Duncan? Well, that was 5 years ago, and when Tim Duncan was 34 years old, he was really, really good. It's not that scary to have a 34-year-old on your team or a 35-year-old on your team. And so when you look at Dennis and Jeff, you could say, well, Dennis is younger, Jeff is older, but the age thing isn't really that big a difference because, if you look at how old Teague is and you look at how old Schroeder are, they're both going to be productive players over the next 4 or 5 years. There's no reason why either one of them shouldn't be productive going forward. They're not so old that, it's not, they're not so old that if you look at them, it's not like they're 33 and at the end of a 4-year deal, they're going to be 37 or something like that. So, I mean, if you theoretically were going to pick one over the other, I don't think age has to factor into it that much. You just go by who you think is a better player. But I really think that, they've got to look at keeping both because if they don't, then they're going to need another point guard. Just it's that important to their offense to have somebody like that.
Oh, yes. That's going to be the tricky thing to watch. And some people are going to be disappointed this summer thinking about that. Just thinking about that, I'm just preparing for the hottest of takes when I see that. But, boy. If we're saying Jeff isn't that old, random fact, I think Jeff is only 2 days older than I am. So I would like to say Jeff is not that old.
There you go.
So his birthday, I want to say, is 2 days right before mine, a day or two right before mine. But
I think that's where I am with Shaq. I think Shaq has a birthday right near mine. Wondering how old I am.
Hey, Shaq.
Now I gotta check this. Is it Shaq? I think it's Shaq.
I'm not going to check it. I'm just going to imagine that you and Shaq are on, kind of like equal footing, especially in.
Yeah, we're pretty close. We're pretty close. It's a couple months.
Okay.
I think I'm better conditioned than he is at this point.
He might be. He might be actually. All right. So, moving on. Let's talk about Dennis. Let's go back to let's go back and talk about why I might have to mentally prepare for Dennis. If Jeff is moved. So you talked about Dennis getting the possibility to lead the team this year in Germany, which is a great point because, Dirk won't be there. So it'll be interesting. And he played for Germany last year, didn't he? I'm trying to remember.
Who, Dirk or?
Dennis.
Yeah, Dennis and Dirk both played for Germany last summer, and they didn't make the qualification. So now they're trying to qualify for the European Championship this summer that'll take place next summer. I always get
Hmm.
it. It's tricky. No, I got to be careful. Is it European or World Championship this next? I think it's a European Championship next summer that they're trying to qualify for.
Wow. That is going to be interesting to watch. You know what? I may have to try to find where these games are at to watch Dennis play this year. But obviously, the whole thing with wanting to keep Dennis is he's the younger player. He's actually kind of skilled. Um, to me, I guess in his career, he is further along than where Jeff was. But at the same time, Jeff didn't have Budenholzer coaching him. He had Mike Woodson for many of those years and Larry Drew. So, yeah, who knows? Um, the
Yeah, I
thing.
think
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying one thing about Schroeder that I think, you know, one thing about Schroeder is that he was a really good defender this year. I think he has great physical tools for defense and that he has like a really long wingspan for a guy his size. So, I think that's one thing that he really has going for him is he's just got a really long wingspan.
And on the other end, Jeff's defense has been brought up by many people. Well, the thing is, at Jeff's high point, he was an all-star, high point in his career. Do we think we can get that out of Dennis? I don't know. I have a soft spot in my heart for Jeff Teague, mostly because. Okay, so here's an exclusive Caw Cast story of why I have a soft spot for Jeff Teague in my heart,
All right,
even
there we
though
go.
even though logically, Dennis to me better. You're right, defense. So when I was in college, there was a North Carolina Tar. I have a North Carolina Tar Heel friend. He's a friend who's just a diehard fan of the team, to the point that he annoyed me at times. So I got the most joy out of watching the. I don't know if you remember the national champion team they had. I want to say Ty Lawson was on the team. Can't remember who else was on that team, but I want to say they had one loss that year, and that was to the Demon Deacons. And hey, Jeff Teague was on that team. So most of my biasness comes from just upsetting my friend and watching him just get upset about Carolina losing. And I would point at that because he was the player on that team. And then also along with being forced to watch the number of Hawks point guards that I had to sit and watch prior to Jeff, the head coach Tyrone Lue, Mike Bibby, Anthony Mason, Salim Stoudemire, AC Law. Yeah, the list goes on. But most of it comes from like, oh my goodness, a point guard with actual skill. I didn't know this was allowed for this team. And that was kind of my time of getting into the Hawks, was back when Tyrone Lue was the point guard for the team. And boy, it was definitely a time. It was definitely a thing. And that's where my fandom for him came from, watching Jeff and watching him kind of grow with the team. But alas.
Teague's, I don't know, I really enjoyed watching Teague this season. I never really got a chance to ask him about it, but he's just got such an assortment of ways to get a defender off balance. I don't want to trivialize it to call it like parlor tricks, but he's just got all these different hesitations, all these different dribbles, all these different fakes, all these different kinds of footwork just to get somebody off balance when he's driving to the rim. And it's just an amazing thing to watch. And I always wonder, how do you pick which move to use at which point? But he's such a veteran presence out there. It's something to behold. I I mean, I think it was kind of a tough year. I know that his ankle was bothering him early in the season, and when he started playing well, it's like, what's going well for you? He's like, my ankle feels better. And I guess he just played through that early in the season, but it was just, I don't know, almost like a pitcher in baseball who doesn't have a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but he's got a curveball and he's got a sinker and he's got a changeup and he can put the ball wherever he wants. It was just kind of fascinating to watch Teague this season. And the other thing that's amazing is there was a statistic floating around earlier this week that Teague was the most accurate shooter in the NBA on catch and shoot 3-pointers this season.
Really?
In a season where Steph Curry and Kevin Durant were doing incredible stuff, I think Teague made like 50% of his catch and shoot threes among players that had taken like 100 attempts or something like that. And certainly maybe he doesn't get guarded in the same manner that Curry gets guarded, but for him to make that kind of a percentage of the ones where he didn't have to do it off the dribble, he could catch it and shoot it. He just had an incredible percentage this year. His 3-point shot was so much better this year than it was last year. That was a good thing to see. So I don't know. I really enjoyed watching Teague this year.
It's fun to watch him go from the guy that would run one speed 100 miles an hour to the rim to a guy who's such a crafty veteran with his moves to draw fouls.
No, I hear you exactly.
He draws fouls really well. From the guy that, if you remember a few years ago, you couldn't count on him to shoot free throws with 2 minutes remaining to, we need to get Jeff the ball because he's the best free throw shooter on the team. Look at me, I'm utilizing whatever, putting a funeral towards his career. Yeah. To his career in Atlanta.
Speaking of eulogizing, before we get off the topic, and since we're talking about point guards,
go ahead.
Can we eulogize Kenny Atkinson's time in Atlanta?
Oh, man.
He goes to Brooklyn. I always want to say New Jersey, but Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
If you watch, we don't get to see that much of the practices, but we get to come in for, the free throw drills and the after practice drill work and things like that. And if, the guy who's always working with the point guards, at least in my eyes, was Atkinson. He was always working with Schroeder on, how to go around a pick and roll, how to come after you use a pick and roll, if they've gone under it, how to come back into a screen. If they go under the pick and roll, what's the right footwork for your jumper, things like that. Atkinson was always working with the point guards. And one of the things I didn't even realize about Atkinson until after he left is that, if you look back at his career, he played, like a dozen or so years as a point guard in Europe. Then when he came over and started coaching here, he did some stuff in Houston. And then he was with the Knicks, and he was with the Knicks during Linsanity. If you watch how good Jeremy Lin was when he was with the Knicks and all the things he was doing as a point guard in Mike D'Antoni's offense, that was Atkinson who was coaching Jeremy Lin at that point and those point guard stuff. And so I just think that Atkinson has been a really positive influence on the Hawks point guards. And then before he's gone, we should say a good word about him.
Thank you, Kenny Atkinson, for everything. It also kind of makes me want to look up, now that you mentioned that about Jeremy Lin. I wonder if he was there when Chris Duhon, for some whatever reason, was a point guard.
New York?
Yeah, I wonder if he was.
I think he might have been.
Okay.
Maybe they overlap, but I think Duhon was definitely like there first.
Well, I remember my thing with D'Antoni and my thing with the system. I was just kind of like, they made Chris Duhon into a player and made people actually think he was good. And I now want to look to see if Kenny Atkinson was there during that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me see if I can Google that in 30 seconds or less.
Okay, so let me continue to talk. Dennis, it makes sense to keep him. He's the younger player. He's someone you'd want to build on for the future. He can play right now. Every year he's improving. boy. But man, it is going to be up and down this year if I have to watch him. Dennis this year to me was the king of the no, 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 yes shot. Just because some of his shot selection to me was just kind of like, I don't know about
To your
that.
Duhan question, yes, Duhan was in New York for 2 seasons, and Atkinson was there for both. That was Atkinson's first 2 seasons with the Knicks.
Okay, well then that answers that because
So are you now more impressed with Kenny Atkinson?
I'm even more impressed because even more impressed now. He got Shelvin Mack, who's probably going to get help Shelvin Mack, help Dennis, help Jeff, help Jeremy Lin, and most importantly, he helped Chris Duhon. Oh man. Okay, well that was something I was curious about. Okay, let's that is good to know. Well then,
Sorry, what were we? I distracted you. You were like halfway into a thought, and I brought you back to Duhan.
I was trying to list the positives of if for whatever
Oh,
reason
the
we have
no, 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 yes thing.
yeah. Gee, Dennis. I was just saying his shot selection at times makes me cringe, even when he's making them. To which, when people, or at least a lot of people, want to criticize that Dennis is going through a cold stretch or a shooting, or he's looking bad, I'm kind of like, no, he's playing the exact same way he always does. He's just not making the stupid shots that he's taking like he does half the time. And
Yeah,
it's going to be an adventure to watch
I
him.
think the thing with Dennis is that he said at the end of the year he's like I want to be able to make more of my shots at the rim. I mean I think what's the way to say this? It kind of involves a lot of things all at the same time. But Dennis is like the thing about Dennis is he's like a maestro at finding the angle to get going where he can get to the rim, and now he wants to get better at making those shots when he gets there. If you talk to the Hawks, one of the things they always emphasize: big priority, big priority, big priority. What's the most important thing? They love to have transition defense. And I think
Yes.
when Dennis goes to the rim and takes a shot right at the rim, if that shot doesn't go in, a lot of times what happens is then he's out of the play as far as transition defense goes, because a lot of the times, to get that shot up at the rim, he's got to lean into it and almost fall over to get it. And so he's sort of, underneath the basket up against the stanchion as the other team is making that transition play into their fast break. And so I'm sure that they want him to get more accurate at the rim just because of the impact that any missed layup has on transition defense. Because I think if you look at all the different types of offense, the thing that really gets an opposing team's fast break going is a missed layup. I have to look at the numbers on that. I know people have studied that kind of thing, but I think if I remember right, I think it's missed layups are the things that lead to opposing fast breaks more than anything else. And part of that is because, the point guard is usually getting knocked around a little bit and ends up on his butt underneath the basket. And so, I'm sure they're going to want him to be a little bit stronger on those drives to the rim just so that they can have that extra defender to defend the fast break going the other way if he misses.
It's true. Makes sense. Yeah, because he always seems to be knocking himself out at the rim. You always see him falling over, getting hit. But, oh boy. The thing that gets me is watching him pull up for a jumper, especially for when a defender will go under on a screen with him. Just pull up for the three-pointer, and he'll do that. Even with playing half and half time with Teague, he manages to get off six, I don't know, a decent amount of three-point shots. So I'm trying to mentally imagine what it would be like if he had starters minutes.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Dennis's three-point shot, last season it was not good through October, November, December, and then like January 1, it clicked for him, and he started making them at like a 42% click for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And this season, it kind of went off and on again. And by the end of the season, if you watch sort of the pre-game shoot-arounds and those minutes before the game started, you'd see Corver just kind of talking to him a little bit, try a little bit of this, try a little bit of that, just trying to coach him up on it. And he said that, he hopes to talk to Corver again this summer and do something where they spend a couple of days together working on that shot. And, it's important for him to be able to drive, that the defenders respect him on that shot. And so, I don't think that the Hawks are going to have any problem with him taking that. If they're going to give him that shot, they're going to want him to take it. They're just going to want him to be really good at it. They're going to want him to make the strides that Teague made over the last couple seasons with it.
True. Okay. All right. You've renewed my faith a little bit. I feel a little bit better, especially when you're saying he's going to go work out with Corver, because now I'm having a mental image of Dennis dragging boulders underwater. As part of his workout.
Yeah, I don't know that he said that they were definitely doing it, but he said, they did it last summer, and he said that he was hoping to do it again this summer. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, so let's have a quick just final statement for that. Logically, if the Hawks somehow get an offer to get, kind of get a one-up in the trade, in a trade, if they can somehow ship Jeff for something, I don't know. I imagine for a draft pick, you'd have to throw in a couple of the Hawks first rounders, since I'm thinking next year, isn't it like if Minnesota makes the playoffs, they'll have 2 first rounders? Is that how that works? Or am I kind of imagining?
No, that sounds right. I think it would be next draft. If Minnesota makes the playoffs, then they get the first. I think it's lottery protected. So if the optimal situation, I think from the Hawks' point of view, is that Minnesota be something like a 7 or 8 seed next year.
Yeah.
So and that doesn't seem too far fetched. I could see that happening, don't you think?
Yeah,
a lot of talent.
They have a lot of new talent this year. Thibodeau is running the team now. I think he'll be great with some of the young players, especially, I guess, since he isn't really coaching for his job anymore. I think that will help. Get another year of the young players. And with how the layout of the West is, of teams that are in the decline, Dallas will take another, at least in my opinion, Dallas might take another step back. You never know with the Trailblazers, what could happen with them. You don't know what would happen with Houston. So a couple of teams could take a step back. And, who knows? It could happen.
Yeah, I agree. That seems like something that could happen.
But real quick, for the team to be at its best, neither one of the point guards should be dealt. And kind of like how you said, one is a restricted free agent, so that should help in the event that none of them get moved. But in fear of, I don't know, the future of what would mess up, this might be the time you would want to shop Jeff, just because I can't imagine his value getting better by the time the trade deadline comes around, if that happens. Also, I think some of this comes down to what else happens with the Hawks in free agency. Might happen. Like, what if Horford signs elsewhere? Then what do you do?
Right. Well, draft night's going to come first.
Oh, man.
The draft night is, in late June, and then the free agency is the moratorium period at the beginning of July. So they won't know their free agent situation on draft night if they're trying to use that information on
That's true. Very true.
On draft night trading.
Yeah. Man, why does NBA got to be difficult like this?
Yeah, that's sort of a theoretical point that some people have brought up over the last few years. Is should it be that way? Should free agency be first, and then teams have, draft night afterwards once they know that what situation shakes out in free agency. It's kind of an interesting theoretical question to think, how would it work if they were to flip-flop those two and let you do free agency first, then do drafting?
Well, it was kind of my theory last year with free agency and the draft, the year that we traded for Tim Hardaway Jr. Part of me was wondering, had the Hawks drafted a small forward or had they drafted, Bobby Portis or whoever, how would that affect the Millsap and or Damari free agency at the time? Because remember, at the time, we were trying to keep both. They're trying to make offers to keep both. It's just, Toronto went and gave Damari that offer. And I don't know. What would Damari's mind at the time have been had he saw the Hawks drafted a small forward?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. It's all it's a lot of mental stuff. But anyway, Jeff, I guess he would be the one. And I'm gonna miss the time. I'm gonna have a special. I'm gonna have a Jeff Teague special if he gets moved. Just a whole episode talking about Jeff Teague for an hour. It's going to be magnificent. I'm going to pull out my Jeff Teague jersey. I'm going to pull up the time way back when okay, little history, guys.
Okay.
There was a time many years ago that I started saying MV Teague on the internet, and I actually, this is when I was young and stupid. More stupid than I am now, which I know is hard to believe. I went to a game when I was in my early years in college, and I want to say I had a sign or a shirt or something like that. I have a picture of it. Someone showed me a picture of it years later. It's saved on my computer of having MVT kind of written out, and it got put on ESPN. This was the series against the Bulls. Derrick Rose's MVP year. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
So my to which I say, Hawks, I want to be. Let's talk about royalties for you guys stealing my phrase.
Yeah, man, that's rough.
But yeah, you go back to that. I'm gonna be crying that day. But but this would be the year. This would be the time. His value would be up there right now. But we will see. And we will see if I'm going to be mentally preparing for starting Dennis Schroeder. One last thing for myself. Someone asked me if the whole Utah Jazz number 12 pick were there, if I would jump on that. Yes, I would hit the yes button without hesitation, knowing that we could even get a lottery pick for Jeff. I'd imagine we have to throw in I think we're 21 or 22. I can't remember. One of those draft picks along with him, but yes, I would. Anyway, KL, go ahead. Give me your closing statements, closing remarks on this whole point guard thoughts.
Oof. With regards to the draft, I have to say that I've not done any work looking at draft things yet. That's one of the things. I'm about a week away from starting to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
At Hawks.com, we're still sort of working on our retrospectives of the things each player did over the last season. So I've been looking back for the last week instead of looking ahead.
I got you.
I know nothing about this draft, right? There's Ben Simmons. He's in the draft, right?
Yeah, Simmons and Jaylen Brown.
I don't know anything about this draft. The one thing I know about this draft is that Sabonis's kid is in it. Is that right?
Yes. I believe this is the year.
So if he makes it to the Hawks, I'm all for them picking him. If he gets down that far, but other than that, I don't know anything about this draft class.
I'm right there with you. And then even if I do talk about the draft, I'm wrong like 75% of the time. I'm wrong.
Right.
So it's whatever. Yeah.
And it's funny, if you look at the Hawks, other than Horford, they've got so many guys that were not lottery picks, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Teague wasn't a lottery pick. Corver was second round. Millsap was second round.
Dennis was 17,
Dennis
as he will
was
tell you by
17.
his jersey number.
Mike Scott was a second rounder. Muscala was a second rounder. I mean, they're not there. Other than Horford, there are so few high draft picks on that roster. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
And so, I
And
don't.
well, I was going to say, and it also makes me, whenever I talk with my friend who's a Wizards fan, I always talk with him. I'm like, because I always say to him, nah, man, your team has more talent. They have talent in the sense that they have multiple, top 3 picks on their team.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
we
if
have
you
one.
throw in Otto Porter and Beal and Wall and even like Nene, like a lot of lottery picks on that team compared to the Hawks for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, well then. KL, thank you for coming on and talking with me. This summer
Sure.
will definitely be interesting.
Will be.
Boy, I have no idea. Last thought. Thoughts on the game tonight? We're recording this on Saturday, the 28th. Right now, this will probably go up maybe Tuesday. I'll probably put this up on Tuesday, but thoughts on tonight's game?
Well, this is Saturday, so by Tuesday I can look really, really bad.
Or really, really good. I don't know. We didn't
think-
really. Oh, go ahead.
I guess I would have to say that I guess I think the Thunder are going to win tonight, but we'll see. I mean, I think Steph Curry, there's that debate about is he hurt, is he not hurt? And I think it's all kind of silly. I mean, I think he doesn't look right, and that could be he's hurt. It could be, the injury threw off his rhythm. But I mean, I don't think he looks quite right, and so I would say that I think the Thunder win tonight. It's kind of sad that they had such an incredible season and they're not even going to make it to the finals. But I mean, that's how I would see it happening.
Okay, Al. If only you lived where I live, and you could. All these people that talked about me supporting a team that got swept by LeBron for the past 2 weeks. I'm not going to say I'm relishing in watching all the guys that bothered me at work for this in my cubicle for this, but no, you're right. It would be kind of sad to see that happen, and especially for the whole we want Draymond Green to be the center debate for the number one for the
yeah, he hasn't been that good.
All NBA.
I think honestly, I don't know. That whole thing with kicking Steven Adams, I think that got in his head a little bit. I think part of the reason he was bad for a couple games is that I think that just psyched him out.
Well, it's also, I'm kind of wondering, is this when the NBA or fans or people in general, is this the time that they're starting to turn around on the Thunder? Excuse me, not the Thunder, the Warriors, because in the past, I want to say they were kind of critic-proof because of how they played and how fun they were and all this stuff. But then I want to say I was speaking with somebody on a podcast I did about a month ago during the Boston series. He told me, he said, well, you notice, they kind of dance on the sideline. They kind of, glare at the bench and stuff whenever they make shot. They run up the score when they don't need to. They're not that far away from being a villain team that we've all hated in the past, but yet, everybody loves them. And so I'm wondering, watching this series and especially the whole Draymond stuff kind of ignited it, is this when the, I guess, NBA fan base population is just kind of like, wait a second. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you watch, you've got Draymond, and he's always talking whether the situation calls for it or not. And so that would be one of the things that's less endearing about the Warriors for sure. And he's doing crazy things with his leg where it just magically keeps ending up in Steven Adams' groin.
Yeah.
And but I
Or
think Bogut too. I mean, if you watch Bogut play, my goodness,
yeah, Bogut.
he's got that Australian basketball player thing. No, I can't even say that. I would get in trouble. But he's, he's
Yeah.
setting moving screens. He's holding people. If somebody goes up near the rim, he might block it, or he might just knock you over. I mean, he's a really physical basketball player, and so yeah, I don't think that he's necessarily going to be a fan favorite from opposing teams when they watch their favorite players get knocked on their butt.
Yeah, and with Draymond, I don't know how it is. Like for someone his age and who's just basically signed his contract extension, how is it he gets so much respect by officials? Because whenever I watch him, I'm just like, this guy is fouling just all the time. Okay, yeah, you were talking about how it's hard to call, fouls way earlier in the podcast. I'm kind of like, Draymond is fouling all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it in a lot of these games in the playoffs. They're just
Yeah.
so physical that you call 5 fouls on any play, and they're not going to do that. And on the plays where they do call something, it's a matter of choosing the one that they can call. It's tricky. I mean, that's not even an indictment of the refs. It's just an indictment of the way the game's played, the way the players are playing it. It's there's so much in the line that nobody wants to give up anything easy, and there's moving screens and holding people off the ball and all sorts of illegal contact that, yeah, I don't know what you do. I don't even know what the right answer is.
Well, I think also for my point, a lot of Hawks fans were able to pick this up. When Curry shimmied in front of the Hawks bench when he hit the three that game in Atlanta, I remember a lot of fans were like, "Wait a second!" And now the ones that I know, some of the ones that noticed that are starting to kind of be like, "Hold on a second, this guy acts incredible." I don't know. It's interesting to watch this transition happen, but
I
oh
really
man,
like Game 5, man. That game was
it was crazy.
Oklahoma City and Golden State, man. They were playing good basketball. Something to watch. Yeah. I don't think we could say that about any of the games that have had Toronto in them.
No. And I'm kind of upset that the Cavs started actually missing 3-pointers when they beat Toronto. I'm really upset about that. I'm like, wait a second. You mean they don't hit contested jumpers now?
Yeah, Toronto could end up being Cleveland's downfall just because Cleveland got so bored that they lost a couple games. I mean, Cleveland was playing so lights out that I think if Toronto had been a little bit better,
yeah,
Cleveland would have taken them seriously the whole time. And
yeah.
I just think Toronto is just such a hot mess that Cleveland was like, yeah, we'll get around to winning this when we get around to winning this.
Well, you talk about free agency. They're going to have an issue with DeMar DeRozan. I mentioned last time. It's going to be interesting to see what he gets.
It's interesting,
Same with the Biz. Same with the Biz.
They're gonna command a lot of money.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
It's gonna be a crazy off season.
Anyway, crazy off season. Crazy commentary today. KL, we talked a really long time about the Hawks today, and it's always a pleasure to have you on here. And thank you for joining me.
All right, have a good one.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys, for listening.